The first time I saw a human, I did not know what it was. I only knew that it was something wholly unlike anything I had encountered before, an anomaly wrapped in flesh, standing alone beneath a bruised twilight sky. I watched it from the tree-line, hidden behind the veil of my ship's failing cloaking field. My breath held in a way that was more instinct than necessity. It was tall for a biped, its frame lean, but taut with coiled strength. It moved with a peculiar mix of grace and unrefined power, each step deliberate but not cautious. There was something in the way it held itself, an unshaken confidence, a quiet readiness for whatever the universe might throw at it. That alone was enough to unsettle me. My kind had traveled the stars for millennia. We had cataloged countless species, from the slow-minded behemoths that roamed the ice worlds of Kaeldus to the hyper-intelligent swarm colonies that lived within the gas giants of Vordum Prime. We had seen warlike creatures, peaceful civilizations, predators and prey. Yet nothing about this being matched any pattern I had studied. It was not the strongest nor the fastest. It carried no natural weapons, no armor, no obvious means of surviving the brutal conditions of this planet without tools or technology. And yet, something in me whispered that this creature was dangerous. I had landed here by accident. A miscalculation during warp transition had thrown my vessel into a gravity well I had not anticipated, and by the time I had managed to wrestle control back from the jaws of catastrophe, I was already plunging through the atmosphere of this primitive world. My ship, damaged and bleeding energy, had guided itself to the most stable surface it could find, a dense forest that stretched for miles. The impact had been less catastrophic than expected, but the damage to my systems was significant. I had hoped at first that I would remain unseen. The technology at my disposal should have ensured it. But this human had noticed something. I saw it pause on the crest of a hill, turning its head slightly as if listening to a sound just beyond perception. Then, with an efficiency that sent a cold pulse through my veins, it began moving toward my position. It did not hesitate. It did not fumble. It did not seem uncertain in any way. My instinct screamed at me to retreat, but I remained still, my eyes locked on the approaching figure. It was close now, too close. I could see the slow rise and fall of its chest, the way its hands flexed slightly at its sides, as if already anticipating the need for violence. It was scanning the area, searching, sensing, and then, impossibly, it stopped directly in front of my position. The human's eyes, sharp and piercing, swept over the spot where I was concealed. For a moment, I thought the cloak had failed entirely. My body tensed, preparing for an encounter that I was not ready for. But then, something happened that unsettled me far more than any direct confrontation could have. The human smiled. Not a smile of warmth, nor one of relief. It was something else, something calculated. It was a smile of a predator recognizing another predator, a confirmation. And then it spoke. "I know you're there." I did not move. The human crouched, resting its forearms on its knees, tilting its head slightly. "You don't have to hide. If you meant harm, you wouldn't have stayed quiet this long." My mind raced. It was bluffing. It had to be. It could not see me. It could not know. And yet, the certainty in its voice, the quiet confidence, made me doubt myself. "You're not an animal," it continued. "Not some lost traveler, either. Not the way you move. Not the way you watch." My kind was known for our observational prowess. We could remain undetected for cycles, learning and understanding without ever being noticed. And yet, somehow, this creature had unraveled my presence within moments. I willed myself to silence, to stillness. The human exhaled, then rose to its full height. "All right," it said, taking a step back. "Suit yourself. But if you're listening, you should know something." It gestured toward the sky, where the first stars were beginning to prick through the darkening horizon. Out there, things work differently. Strength, speed, numbers, those are what decide who wins. Then it tapped a single finger against its temple. But down here, it's about something else. A pause. A final glance toward my hiding place. Welcome to Earth. Then, without another word, the human turned and walked away, disappearing into the deepening shadows. I remained where I was, my pulse a steady drum in my ears. I had landed on a world that was, by all accounts, unremarkable, primitive, unthreatening. And yet, as I stood in the wake of that encounter, I felt something I had never experienced before. Dread. I had met a human, and I prayed I would never meet another. I did not leave immediately. I told myself it was because my ship required further repairs, that the delicate balance of my energy reserves required careful rationing before another attempt at departure. These were practical concerns, logical reasons to remain. And yet, as I stalked through the dense forest, as I traced the path the human had taken, I knew the truth. I stayed because I needed to understand. The encounter had unsettled me in a way I could not rationalize. The human had sensed me, had spoken to me without fear, without hesitation. It had left without confirming my presence. Yet I had the unshakable impression that it knew, without question, that I had been there. That moment replayed in my mind, gnawing at me like an unsolved equation. I followed it carefully, keeping to the shadows, adjusting my movements to mask any trace of sound. My people had perfected the art of observation over centuries, and I moved with the practiced silence of a being who had spent entire lifetimes watching without being seen. The human, however, walked as though it had no reason to hide, with a kind of self-assured ease that only deepened my discomfort. I expected to return to settlement, to a structure of some kind, a place where others of its kind gathered. Instead, it led me to a clearing, a temporary camp, little more than a fire pit and a weathered pack resting against the roots of a tree. The simplicity of it struck me. No walls, no barriers, no defenses, and yet there was no indication that the human felt vulnerable. It settled by the fire, producing a blade from its belt with a smooth, practiced motion. It began carving into a piece of wood, its posture loose, its expression unreadable. I waited. For what? I wasn't certain. A sign of weakness. Perhaps some lapse in awareness that might reassure me that I had imagined the first encounter, that I had overestimated its ability to perceive me. Then, without looking up, the human spoke. You followed me. The blade did not pause. The fire crackled, the distant hum of nocturnal creatures filling the silence between us. My skin tightened. I had given no sign, left no trace. It should not have known. I get it, the human continued, rotating the piece of wood in its hands. You're curious. Don't blame you. If our positions were reversed, I'd probably do the same. I remained frozen, my mind racing through possible responses. My ship's translator was functional, though I had not yet tested its accuracy with the species. Speaking now, revealing myself, felt like stepping into an unknown battlefield. The human finally looked up, and for the first time, our eyes met without the veil of my cloaking field between us. It did not flinch. It did not startle. If it was surprised, it did not show it. It studied me, its gaze analytical but not hostile. It took in my form, my stance, the way my fingers hovered near the controls of my cloak. Then it smiled again, that same slow, knowing expression that made something cold settle in my gut. You don't scare easy, it said. That's good. I found my voice. You knew I was there. Figured. The human leaned back, propping one arm against a tree. You move too well, too quiet, not like an animal, not like something that doesn't know how to be hunted. It gestured toward me with the blade, not threateningly, but with the casual familiarity of someone pointing out an obvious truth. I don't know what you are, it admitted, but I know how you move, and that tells me what I need to know. The word sent a ripple of unease through me. Movement was everything. It was identity. It was intention. My people had learned to read the subtlest shifts in posture, the flickers of muscle tension that betrayed thought before action. Yet here, on this primitive world, was a being who had done the same to me. I took a slow step forward. The human did not react. I took another, letting the last remnants of my cloaking field dissolve. The firelight cast long shadows against my features, illuminating the stark contrast between us. My elongated limbs, my smooth, reflective skin, my eyes, black and depthless. The human studied me with the same calm curiosity as before. Then it tilted its head. You're not the first thing I've met that wasn't supposed to exist, it said. but you're the first that hasn't tried to kill me on sight. I considered this. Have others? A small, humorless chuckle. Oh, yeah. I let the silence stretch, weighing my next words carefully. You do not seem afraid. The human shrugged. Should I be? I did not answer. The truth was, I did not know. I shifted my focus, scanning the small camp, searching for anything that might give insight into its nature. There was a rifle propped against a tree, a worn but well-maintained weapon. Tools, efficiently arranged. A small stack of books, physical texts, primitive by galactic standards. A map marked with careful notations. A survivalist, then, or something more. You are alone, I observed. The human exhaled, gaze flickering toward the fire. Yeah, by choice. Another pause. Then, softer, not at first. Something about the answer unsettled me more than anything else that had been said. The human met my gaze again. You planning to stick around? I hesitated. I do not know. It nodded, as if that answer made perfect sense. Well, it said, tossing the card into the flames, watching as it caught and curled into embers. If you do, you might want to ask yourself something. I waited. Who's really studying who? It reached for the rifle, not as a threat, not as a warning, but as an inevitability. As if to say, you are not the only one watching. I stepped back into the darkness, my mind a storm of calculations and unanswered questions. I had come here believing myself the observer. I was no longer sure that was true. I should have left. I knew that. Every rational instinct told me that lingering here was a mistake. And yet, something held me in place, something beyond logic, beyond caution. I told myself it was curiosity, the need to understand this human, to dissect the way it moved, the way it thought. But the truth ran deeper, colder. I needed to know if I was looking at an exception or a rule. The human had continued as if my presence was an accepted fact, neither threatened nor particularly concerned by it. It moved through the days with an unsettling ease, setting traps, collecting resources, scanning the horizon with an awareness that never wavered. Every action was precise, purposeful. There was no wasted movement, no hesitation. Even in sleep, what little seemed to take, it never fully relaxed. I studied from the trees, unseen, unchallenged. I told myself I was in control of this game, that I had the advantage. But doubt had begun to settle into my bones like a slow poison. Then, one evening, something changed. The human was gone. I had watched it return to camp the night before, had tracked its every movement. The rhythm of its routine burned into my mind. And yet, when I returned my vantage point, the clearing was empty. The fire had burned to embers, the rifle missing from its usual place. There were no footprints leading away, no sign of departure. A trap. The realization struck hard, a crack of ice splintering through my chest. I turned sharply, my senses flaring outward, searching. My cloaking field rippled into activation, my muscles coiling. I had been so focused on watching that I had not considered the possibility that I was being watched in return. And then I heard it, a whisper of movement. So faint, so controlled that it barely registered. But it was there, behind me. I twisted, dropping low, my instincts overriding thought. A shape blurred from the underbrush, faster than I had expected. The human. I had seen it move before, but never like this. Gone was a deliberate slowness, the calculated restraint. Now, it was a thing of momentum and violence, closing the distance between us in the span of a single breath. I barely evaded the strike, feeling the air shift as the human's blade carved through the space where my throat had been. I moved, regaining distance, recalibrating. This was not an attack born of fear or desperation. This was a test. The human's eyes locked onto mine, sharp, focused. It adjusted its grip on the knife, rolling its shoulders in a way that made my skin tighten. "You're fast," it admitted. I figured as much. I did not answer. There was nothing to say. The human attacked again. I had fought before. My people were not warriors by nature, but we were not defenseless. I had trained in the art of evasion, in counter movements designed to neutralize aggression without sustaining damage. But this fight was unlike any I had experienced. The human did not follow patterns. It did not move in predictable loops of aggression. Every strike, every shift in weight, every feint was designed to adapt, to react to what I did a moment before. It learned as it fought. It adjusted with terrifying speed. I had the advantage in reach, in flexibility, in raw agility. But the human had something else, something more dangerous. It refused to lose. I caught its wrist mid-swing, twisting sharply. A normal opponent would have stumbled, would have given me the opening I needed to disengage. The human did not. Instead, it let the momentum carry it, turning the fall into a roll, using the motion to launch a brutal kick toward my ribs. Pain flared. I staggered back, my vision sparking. The knife was gone from its hand, thrown somewhere mid-motion. A feint, a distraction. The rifle was already rising. A choice. My body moved before thought could catch up. I lunged, closing the gap between us before the weapon could align. My hand wrapped around the barrel, forcing it downward. The human reacted instantly, shifting its weight, using leverage instead of strength. We crashed to the ground in a tangle of limbs, the struggle raw, primal. For the first time in my life, I felt something unfamiliar coil in my gut. Not strategy, not calculation, desperation. The human pinned me, its forearm pressing against my throat. Not hard enough to crush, but enough to prove a point. Its breath was steady, controlled, despite the exertion. Then it smiled, not with cruelty, not with malice, but with understanding. Yeah, it murmured. That's what I thought. The pressure eased. It stepped back, retrieving its rifle with practiced ease, dusting itself off as though this had been nothing more than a friendly exchange. I remained where I was, chest rising and falling too quickly, my body still primed for combat that was no longer happening. The human studied me for a long moment, then nodded. You're not a predator. I stiffened. You're a survivor, it continued. Like me? It turned, walking away as if the fight had never happened, as if nothing had changed. But everything had, because now I understood. I had not been the one testing the human. It had been testing me. The storm came without warning. One moment, the forest was still, bathed in the dying light of the sun. The next, the sky split open and the wind howled through the trees like a wounded beast. I felt the pressure drop, an unnatural shift that sent the smaller creatures scurrying for cover. My species had evolved to detect such changes, to sense the coming of disaster before it arrived. The human did not flinch. It sat by the fire, watching the sky with the same quiet intensity one had come to recognize. It had known this was coming, not through heightened senses or advanced technology, just experience. You should find cover, I said, stepping forward from the shadows. The human glanced at me, then tilted its head slightly. That right? I gestured toward the sky. This storm will not be kind. A short, amused exhale. No, it won't. And yet it remained seated. The fire sputtered as the first drops of rain hissed against the embers. The wind carried the scent of ozone and damp earth. I had seen storms like this before on other worlds. Lightning that could split trees, winds that could strip flesh from bone. The human did not move. Something in me bristled. Why do you stay? It considered my question, rolling a small stone between its fingers. Finally, it said, because leaving won't change the storm. A crack of thunder shook the ground beneath us. The trees bent, their branches groaning under the strain. I felt the static hum against my skin, the charged air thick with potential devastation. The fire guttered out, swallowed by the wind and rain. Still, the human remained. I could not understand it. My kind did not fear storms, but we respected them. We did not challenge the forces of nature. We adapted, avoided, survived. This creature, however, met the storm head-on, as if daring it to strike. Lightning split the sky, and the human smiled. Something in my chest tightened. You are reckless. The human shook its head. No, just used to it. I could not look away. For all my observations, for all my studies, I had never truly understood this being. Its confidence was not arrogance. Its defiance was not foolishness. This was something else, something deeper. It did not fear the storm because it had lived through worse. It had learned to endure not by avoiding hardship, but by facing it. And suddenly I understood the reason it had not run when it first sensed me, the reason it had tested me, measured me, rather than treating me as a threat. Survival was not just an instinct to this human. It was a choice, a skill sharpened through suffering. I stepped forward, standing beside it as the storm raged around us. My cloak flickered, struggling against the elements, and I let it fail. There was no point in hiding anymore. The human glanced at me, then back at the sky. You ever seen a storm like this? I shook my head. Not on this world. A small nod, as if that answer made sense. As if anything in this moment could make sense. Lightning struck again, the ground trembling beneath us. Rain lashed against my skin, cold and relentless. The wind howled, screaming its fury into the night. And yet we stood, two beings from different worlds. Two creatures shaped by entirely different forces. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I had come here believing myself superior, an observer of a lesser species. But now, standing beside this human, watching it stare into the storm with unshaken resolve, I knew the truth. Humans were not the strongest, nor the fastest. They did not have natural weapons, nor armored skin. But they endured, they learned, and they did not break. I met a human long ago, and you should pray you never do.